Hello, and welcome to Fear and Trembling with Horror, the podcast that brings you all things horror into conversation with philosophy, theology, religion, literature, just the stuff of life. I'm one of your hosts, Jared, and I'm joined with my good pal, Ryan. Now, I have to say, the basis of our friendship started over discussing horror films in a dorm room far too long ago, I must admit. We were in college together, we did grad school together, and we've watched countless horror films while eating pizza and Jiffy Pop popcorn. We debated best and worst slasher films, and we have had fun along the way. And we like to peel back the onion, looking at all the cultural meaning and profundity or lack thereof of horror films.
Yes, so I think one of the things that would have been appropriate would be looking at Lord of Illusions on this maiden episode. But
Yes, Lord of Illusions.
Famke Janssen's Illusions. Anyway, on today's episode, we're going to be looking at David Gordon Green's trilogy that started back in 2018 with the release of H40, as it was called on the streets, Halloween 40 years later, where it basically ignored all of the sequels and all of the alternate timelines to kind of have a clean slate sequel to John Carpenter's masterpiece from 1978. So we're going to look at these three films, Halloween, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends today, and kind of look at what David Gordon Green and Danny McBride brought to the franchise.
Yeah, you and I saw that first film when it came out in the theater. I remember the theater that you and I went to was under reconstruction, and so it was ripped down to the studs and the subfloor. It was a creepy looking space. Forget the film that we were watching, which really added to the ambiance. And I have to say, as a big fan of Deborah Hill and John Carpenter's original Halloween, I was incredibly happy with David Gordon Green and Danny McBride's the reimagination of it. I thought it brought it back to form, surpassing many errors along the way in the sequels, and I think the dumpster fire that was the Rob Zombie episodes. However, when we get back to the original of this new trilogy, one of the things you have to note is it takes place 40 years later when Laurie Strode is a grown grandmother with a daughter who's a grown woman, and the question is basically, what would her life be like with this trauma having affected her as a teenager? And it's a fairly realistic depiction of somebody who's lost everything, given themselves into substance abuse, and has basically never shed herself of the monster, Michael Myers.
Yeah, it's certainly an extended look at despair, isn't it? That she has had a daughter, though, which is interesting, and the daughter has a daughter, and you can see Allison being like the exact opposite of what her mom was, and that tracks. Anytime we experience trauma in our lives, we're always parenting against our parents. Trying to right those wrongs that we thought we experienced as kids. And so, that's certainly what we encounter in this film, with Allison and Karen, as her name is.
Yeah, don't be such a Karen.
Karen, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that I loved about it was that it did continue the story. Here's Laurie Strode after Halloween night, as she's grown up, as she's tried to cope, as she has had, as we said, this trauma. It's taken that trauma story very seriously in a genre that hasn't always honored trauma. It's honored the big bad fear and get over it, or maybe just end the story. But here, this is the lingering monster that continues.
Well, and the slasher genre certainly, it likes to explore trauma from the killer's perspective. There's always some type of trauma, whether it's physical, psychosexual, whatever, that has led to the creation of this particular masked killer. Though with Michael Myers, you don't really get that. He was a 6-year-old boy that just flipped a switch one day, grabbed a knife and a mask, woo, and you don't really find out much else beyond a couple of speeches in the original. So it was a very interesting turn to see them go, oh, well, let's look at the psychological trauma that might be from the survivor's perspective, and really kind of dive deep into her life and see what havoc that's caused. And so
I,
for that very reason, yeah, 2018 was a welcomed, um, very welcomed entry into the franchise for that purpose.
I like that you brought up Michael's origin story because it really is one of the reasons why there's a mystique around his character. He doesn't have one. We even see in the original the 6-year-old boy coming home on Halloween night after his sister has the fastest of trysts with a boyfriend. Michael goes into her room and kills her violently with a knife. He is locked away in an asylum. We don't know why he is the way he is, what decision led him to this, if he had some sort of attachment disorder or if he's just pure evil. In fact, they
Yeah.
play and question that question the entire way through. That's one of the things that Carpenter is famous for talking about is the two types of evil that you see in stories. The evil that's on the outside of humanity, this would be the supernatural, or this could be alien of some type or magical. And then the horror, the evil that is inside of humanity, which is represented well by Jekyll and Hyde or the Wolf Man. And what you have with Michael Myers when he, in the original, comes of age, breaks out of the asylum, as he dons a mask. Now, famously, that mask, not to bore people who know this really well, it was a cheap William Shatner or Captain Kirk mask, doctored up a little, but it looks like a blank stare, a blank face. And Carpenter's whole idea was to let it be a projection of whatever fear you have. And so in the script, we don't see the character Michael Myers on the page. You see the character called the Shape.
Yeah.
So whether or not it really is a projection or it's just simply a ghostless, a faceless, ghost-like haunting with the big question of mystery, why is he doing this? It becomes a very terrifying plot and a plot device all the way through. Now, then we come to this new movie in 2018, and
Yeah.
the monster is lingering, even though the Shape is in a criminal asylum for the criminally insane. The Shape is still there in Laurie Strode's mind, driving a wedge between her and her daughter, her granddaughter, and with bringing her to the love affair with her bottle.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's experienced, watching the Shape or Michael get shot in the chest 6 times, and then disappearing at the end of the first film, right? So that she's experienced encounters with the boogeyman. So she always has this fear of he's going to come back. It's not a matter of if, but when, even though he's seemingly locked away, able to rot, in a federal insane asylum, who somehow, has a not a what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
Yeah, his doctor is not a good faith actor, right? The guy that the guy that took over for Loomis he's missing a few things, so he's not a good faith actor. So that's one of the things that kind of helps him escape. But she is just dead set on everything in her life, preparing for the moment when she has to come face to face with the boogeyman again. And you have all the good elements from the original, and I like what you said as this being a callback to that in tone. You have the mask, that somehow it's not just Michael, and it's not just the mask, but it's those two things together. And there's a couple of scenes, the 2018 version that really, when they're in the yard and the checkered floor out there, where they get all the sun and the two podcasters. He's like, Michael, I got your mask. And, there seems to be some connection, at least with Michael and the mask. But yeah, it's got all the elements. I think 2018 was a very good exploration of not just Laurie's trauma, but in a very weird way, you have this doctor trying to understand what makes Michael tick. They come in 2018, they come dangerously close. Well, they don't come as close to making the same mistake as Rob Zombie did, but I could defend that a different day. And I will certainly defend his take on evil over and against David Gordon Green's conclusion to Halloween Ends. I think he makes the same mistake as
Well, before you listen, you're teasing
yeah,
too much. Before you get too
teasing.
far, yes,
Ooh.
you're teasing. Let's talk about the trio, the narrative structure, the trio of characters
Mhm.
that's got you have going on. You have Laurie Strode, who's been traumatized, who's basically prepared her entire life, prepared her daughter her entire life to the point of actually getting in trouble with the state. For Michael Myers to return. And so she set up her life as a bit of a fortress of solitude. Her daughter Karen decides to, and she actually says something to the effect of, "You choose to see the world as violent and scary and awful. I choose to see it as full of light and happiness and joy." And it's a choice made to see it as purely almost Pollyanna. And then in between those two, you have the granddaughter who's being tugged in two different directions. And
Mhm.
then that little triangle of the narrative triangle of characters is disrupted uh, by someone who comes to do evil on Halloween night once more, named Michael Myers. It's almost to say, if you watch all the films, that neither one of those understandings of the world are completely accurate. Perhaps that it's all dark and bad and scary is lacking nuance, and perhaps that it's all light and puppies and rainbows and is too lacking the nuance. There is the propensity for good and evil, but the question for Halloween always is, what is evil? Now,
Yeah.
earlier on in some of the original and some of the early sequels, you have that question of what is Michael Myers? Is Michael Myers pure evil or whatnot? And I do think that this is a draw for audiences. I'll never forget when
Mm.
I was working as a youth minister, and we were at uh, a conference with some kids, and they had come across Halloween on their hotel room at night. And the next morning at breakfast, they were talking about it. And when I walked over, they hushed themselves. But then I caught wind of what they were talking about. Of course, it piqued my interest. Halloween being my favorite slasher of all time, Michael Myers
Right.
being one of my favorite characters in in that subgenre. And so I made the mistake of answering one or two questions.
Oh,
And then
oh
the
Lord.
rest of the time, these junior high boys following me around, wanting to know, but why does he do this? Where does he come from? And they were caught up into this near mythological character. And I'm
Mm.
not even talking about the movies that make him mythology and the ancient runes and stuff that happens later with Paul Rudd. If you want to see an early
The
Paul Rudd,
Thorn trilogy, yes.
but I'm talking about simply the mythology that comes out of the mystery. Well,
Mm.
here you have Dr. Loomis saying things like that he looked into his eyes and he saw nothing but the devil's eyes, the blackest eyes,
Yeah.
pure evil. Then
Yes.
you have later in the Rob Zombie accounts, and this is all I really wish to say of it, is that Loomis in those accounts is talking about how evil Michael Myers is innately, yet he goes to great pains to show you the abuse and trauma that Michael Myers suffered that created him to be this monster. Well, which one
Yeah.
is it? That's the question
Well,
always being asked. Is Michael Myers made, or is he born this way?
yeah. I mean, well, to take a direct quote from the Samuel Loomis in that particular version of Halloween, he's like, Michael Myers was the perfect storm of interior and exterior circumstances that came together to create what he became. And I think there's something to that. Uh, he has this when he's in the hospital, with Michael, and he's doing that, doing the the
Are you
psychology
talking
thing.
about in the Rob
Yeah,
Zombie dumpster
yeah,
fire? Okay.
yeah. He has this. Michael makes one of his first rudimentary masks. Because Rob Zombie shows Michael having this fascination with wanting to hide his face and hide who he is, and Michael makes this mask out of he colors this mask black, and this conversation between him and Malcolm McDowell, his Samuel Loomis, basically says, well, black's my favorite color. And Loomis goes, well, black isn't a color. It's the absence of color, isn't it? And he talks about this whole spectrum of colors, how black is the absence of color and white is all the colors. And basically that becomes an entire metaphor, that whole movie, for the blackness that comes to possess Michael, right? It's the absence of everything that makes a human being a human being. And you could call that, they do throw around the term psychopath in that film. But it actually kind of works for every take in Halloween, right? This idea that the blackness is the absence of the good. Um, you could do with that what you want, but I
Yeah,
find that I
you
find
can.
that I find that conversation in that hospital scene a little bit more compelling than I did. I like to tease a lot. I'm sorry, a little bit than I did the conclusion of Halloween Ends.
Well, I
Sorry.
think we're going to agree that the Halloween Ends fails with the first two achieving. We'll get on with it. But
Yeah.
yes, you can play a lot with that very shallow metaphor. Let's move on.
Ooh, I liked. Never mind.
Uh, let's move on. Okay, what were some of the favorite tropes in the first one in 2018, the first of the David Gordon Green? I'm just going to go throw one out and let's see if we can play a little pickleball here with it, back and
Yeah.
forth. I like the role reversals. I just,
Mm.
everything from the final girl, and go ahead and give us a description of final girl.
Yeah, so it's oftentimes the final girl is the one that could easily recognize the danger that they're in, that surrounds them, and is often like virtuous compared to her other friends, uh, and she's the one that typically uses her wits or her intelligence to outsmart and outmaneuver a much larger, more physically abled opponent. Um, that's a bad butchering of what the final girl is, but that's essentially what it is. She is like the last most aware person that is able to take on the evil.
And certainly out of the 70s and 80s final girl, usually she's morally upright considering the norms and mores of the day. She doesn't drink, do drugs, she doesn't have sex.
Right.
It's kind of it kind of becomes a trope. And Laurie Strode is a final girl. Her
Yeah.
innocence lets her see what her otherwise busybodied in numerous ways friends can't see because they're too busy. They're too
Right.
caught up, and usually it's caught up in teen angsty sex and stuff like that. Which we can talk about all of those tropes later. But
Yeah.
I loved it because oftentimes that final girl, even though they're the ones who can see and overcome, still they're somewhat they're still the preyed upon. But
Hmm.
this flips it over, and Laurie becomes the hunter of the monster.
Sure.
She sets traps for Michael Myers. There's that reversal at the end of the very first Halloween. They look over the balcony after Michael has been shot by Loomis, and mysteriously his body is gone. There's a
Yeah.
time where she falls out the window in a
Oh yeah.
confrontation with Michael, and he looks down to see her, and her body's gone.
Is gone.
She's
Yeah.
become totally this weathered by the storms of life, total BA grandmother who,
Hmm.
yeah, she's got her demons. She loves the bottom of a bottle and her Percocet, but she's got some sawed-off shotguns, and she's going to come for you, Michael Myers. I
Right. Yeah.
love it.
She's going to become an active defender, and not just, she's going to take possession of having to defend herself, right, from whatever evil that's out there lurking, rather than just being, like a passive. Oh, you're here now. I got to run away.
And from a
Um,
babysitter to a grandma bear, mama
mm,
bear.
yes, and one of the things that I think this is like, there are several examples of final girls throughout slasher history, right? Laurie Strode is like one of the prime examples of, she's like, that character is like the first example of what a final girl is. She's somewhat resourceful, but she's not like a Nancy or a Heather Langenkamp in the original Nightmare, where Nancy takes possession over learning about her dreams, setting traps, becoming active about survival techniques, right? And you have in a number of slasher films anything in between. That's what I liked about this 2018 version of Laurie. She is no longer this kind of passively surviving, in the first, like she did in the first film. And now she's actively into survival, and that's a much fuller version, a much fuller character of what the final girl is and can be, much like I said Nancy was in the original Nightmare. And I think, and Sidney Prescott, right? They're all kind of
From
uh,
Scream.
from Scream. Yeah, these are like the pinnacle of what final girls are modeled after, right? Um, and so, yeah, I really liked how they took, Laurie's character and had her, not to throw out spoilers, but certainly more active in her defense.
Yeah, and they do a lot of flipping things over. Like there's the male virgin who's going to lose his virginity to a more experienced girl.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of turning basically 1970s and 80s uh, cultural stereotypes on their head, in keeping with more today's culture. And of course, it ends. Laurie's house is a trap for Michael Myers. The three women um, trap him, and he is then set afire with the rest of the house. Let's move on to the second one and move
Yeah.
through it. It begins there as the three women have been. Looks like they've been rescued by a passerby. They're riding in the back of the truck. There's wounds, there's blood, there's a knife, and then there's a fire truck heading towards the burning house, which Lori freaks out. No, let it
Let it
burn.
burn.
Let it burn. And of course, we see emerging like a black phoenix. Let's see, Rob Zombie's black is evil. Okay.
Okay.
From the phoenix, Phoenix from the ashes is Michael Myers, and he takes down all the firefighters and begins another reign of mayhem.
Yeah, some of the best, at least I think some of the best shot compositions from Halloween Kills comes from that opening sequence of him walking onto the porch with the fireman pickaxe, and it just kind of is like slow motion. It just kind of stays there for a second, and he's kind of silhouetted by the burning of the house, and you're like, oh, let's take them on one by one.
Yeah, so still
Oops.
playing
Yeah.
into the lack of clarity that's ever really established whether or not he's somehow superhuman in terms of power or almost just like roid rage angry.
Yeah.
He's definitely capable of withstanding a great deal of pain. The second installment from David Gordon Green and Danny McBride very much parallels the second installment from Carpenter and Deborah Hill, in that it continues on that very night.
Yeah.
This time we have the play of an attempt of vigilante justice,
Yes.
starting in a bar. That's where all good justice begins, in a bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Street justice, and the ineptitude of the actual authorities to really do anything about it. That is a key element to any good slasher film, is the ineptitude of authorities. Sorry, guys, you still can't get it right. So nobody's wearing any thin blue line shirts in these films. And so, yeah, vigilante justice. The justice of the streets come. Hey, we're gonna hunt him down. We've had enough. We're gonna hunt him down. And ironically, this is not the first time in a Halloween movie that a mob takes to the streets. That actually happened. I believe it was Halloween 4 when that took place. And so there's some parallels there to when. I think where you're going to land the plane about scapegoating and stuff like that. Again with the teasing. Sorry, guys. Um, so yeah, it's mob violence. What do you do when you feel like there's no one out there to help you? Right.
Well, since you've teased it, let's go ahead and say what's going on in the bar on Halloween night. Many of the main characters throughout that narrative, as well as other ones, who have faced Michael Myers in the past, including Tommy Doyle, who Laurie Strode babysat the night 40
Mm-hmm.
years before. They're at the bar, they're drinking, they get up, they tell the story, they drink in honor of their trauma. Finding out that this lunatic has escaped, as they call him, and they begin chanting and creating a furor and just a fever pitch of emotion as the movie goes. It grows and grows and grows and grows and grows with the phrase "Evil dies tonight."
Evil dies
It
tonight.
reminds me a lot, as I say it out loud, of a George W. Bush era war on evil.
Oh yes,
Something
the the
difficult.
axis of evil.
Well, well, I'm not trying to be partisan. It's simply an indefinable concept. When you say evil, you have to define it. And if there's evil, even in the hearts of the good, where does your war begin and stop? And
Mm-hmm.
so Michael Myers becomes the scapegoat. The Even though he is guilty, he becomes the
Yeah.
scapegoat for everyone else in the community. Somehow, taking care of him will help cure their pain.
Right.
And what they participate in throughout the film, and by the way, when you watch it, you will see the unjust death and destruction to others because of their reign of terror
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
after Michael Myers. You see what the cultural theorist and philosopher Rene Girard calls mimetic desire. And mimetic desire is about imitation, and it really does fuel the scapegoating mechanism. The idea of mimetic desire is that other people have what you want, and you need to be like them to be fulfilled in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes place a lot of times in the ritual and the cultic, where this is where mob mentality grows. Uh, you're acting angry, and I need to act as angry. I need to match your anger. You need to match my anger. It goes back and forth, and this is where the mob can easily come from. And we've seen just these past few years mob mentality, which has almost lacked the reason of individuals, and it's
Mm-hmm.
because we have fed off the frenzy of each other. And
Yeah.
that frenzy gets going in this film, and they think that they can take Michael Myers out. Spoiler, they don't. Uh, they get
Yeah.
taken out,
Yeah.
and innocent people along the way get taken out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it reveals to us that whatever your definition of evil is, which is important, um, it can end up doing much harm to you as anything, and how you approach it.
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah, this for me, whenever I was watching this, this particular form of vigilante justice, um, and there's actually another scene beyond what the one you're talking about that ends at the hospital, you know, where they do get in front of Michael Myers, like a group of 35, 40 of them. They've trapped him to take again justice into their own hands, which is very the opposite of seemingly how he got caught between the Carpenter's first film and David Gordon Green's 2018 version, where they tried to let the authorities do what they were going to do. Um, and that seemed to somewhat work for a few years, but there was always this danger of, oh, he could get out. So they take those matters into their own hands, and it reminded me of the Nietzsche quote where he says, "Whoever fights monster should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. And that quote, these guys in the process of hunting Michael Myers and wanting to fight that evil become the very thing that they're intending to fight. It's like they try to fight evil on its own terms, and I think that's one of the things that any Michael Myers movie or slasher movies in some ends, it's like fighting violence with violence.
Hmm.
um Especially in Halloween Kills, my goodness, you've got in that alley in the back, after they don't get their man, at the hospital, they reconvene, set a trap, and then they do get their man, and it's pretty gruesome. It dare I say, teeters on the edge of Rom Zombie gruesome.
No,
Mm,
no.
no,
Rob
no.
Zombies is a carnival at the edge of a trailer park during a tornado with a
Ouch.
dumpster fire in the center, and he likes
Oh
that
man,
aesthetic. He
man,
loves the aesthetic, and the
that's
aesthetic
harsh.
is a gross one. It's hard to even identify. But
It's
anyway,
grotesque for sure.
let's
Yeah,
so Michael Myers makes it through.
yeah.
Other characters, have suffered the consequences of their hubris, their their hubris with the crowd,
Yeah.
and he lives to see another day. And then we move on to Halloween Ends, thinking that this was going to be compelling. I really did. I found the first two so compelling
Yeah.
that I thought maybe we would have a good understanding of evil in this universe, or we would be left again with mystery, but still a mystery that was worth teasing out, because there is always something beyond our grasp when it comes to identifying or understanding something such as evil.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and try to skin this pig. Uh, the third one starts out strangely. The font, the coloring of the font isn't that typical orange for Halloween. It's blue. It's kind of almost signaling to you from the very beginning that things are upside down in this film.
Mm-hmm. I read somewhere that the font and coloring was the same type found on Season of the Witch. Shockingly enough,
Season of the Witch being the one that did not have
Halloween
Michael
3, yeah,
Myers, and
yeah.
it's a strange one. So what happens is we have this very. I'm going to try to kind of get through this one kind of quickly, but you got a story about a same night, Halloween night, Michael Myers has come back, but in another part of town, a very wealthy person's home, a good upstanding young man comes to babysit and watch after a little kid who is by all accounts a handful, and he locks himself into the attic, and there's all this stuff going on in terms of just power dynamics with this little rich kid.
Yeah.
And there's a panic moment from the babysitter, kicks in this door, and through the most tragic of circumstances, the little boy tumbles.
Gets what he deserves.
Stop.
Ooh, okay, just
Tumbles.
kidding.
Okay, tumbles over the banister and falls the many flights of stairs in his palatial home,
Yeah, you said they were rich. It's like 4 stories.
and he dies. And of course, when the family comes home, this whole thing, it wrecks the family. It wrecks the mom. It wrecks the kid's reputation, the young man, and it becomes one more. Well, you find out one more mark of tragedy that has fallen upon Haddonfield.
Because of all the things that happened in Halloween Kills, right? Because this opening to Halloween Ends takes place in 2019, right? And then they're gonna fast forward 4 years to 2022 or 3 years, but this particular event took place seemingly the Halloween after Halloween Kills. So Michael's still on the lam. He's killed what, almost 50 people, 60 people, from Halloween Kills. I mean, the body
All in
counts.
a day's work.
Yeah, the body count's high in that one. So for Corey to be spooked was
That's his
legitimate.
name is Corey.
Yeah, Corey. The babysitter, the male babysitter, there's a trope flipped on its head. So he's got every reason to be kind of like, oh, something's going on. And the kid, also probably heard rumblings on the streets, haha, I'm going to play a trick and, pretend that Michael's in the house. Legitimate boogeyman status again. And so it does make sense that he would be acting that way. But yeah, it's a very tragic situation that again is tied back to all the other trauma connected to the Michael Myers story, if you will.
The milieu of the town has changed. Firstly,
Yes.
I think they set the film in Haddonfield, but I think it must have been filmed somewhere else. It didn't have the same look at all, which I found
No.
very disconcerting as a viewer. Like I felt like I didn't know where I was any longer. So if that was intentional, I don't think it does what it wanted to do. And if it was unintentional, well, that's a flaw, because I felt
Yeah.
displaced as a viewer. Where are
Yeah.
we? I don't
Yeah.
feel, and then ultimately the milieu of the town, like psychically, emotionally, just kind of out there in the ether, is this sense of negativity. Things have gone tilted, if you will, off their axis. And Michael Myers has talked about on the radio, and people talk about becoming nasty to each other and lacking more than manners, lacking kindness and grace and joy
and empathy. Yeah.
It's almost like there's a parasite upon an entire community. Meanwhile, Lori has her own home. She's trying desperately to write memoirs about her story with Michael Myers,
Yeah.
to be normal, to have a normal life. Her granddaughter's a nurse now, and it looks like they've continued their lives. However, as it happens, her granddaughter makes the acquaintance of this Corey fellow who has got a pall walking all around him of rumor and everything else. And certain people want to pick on him. It's kind of strange. And, as he's like this completely able-bodied, like young man, and these high school kids pick on him.
Not just high school kids, banned high school kids.
Yeah.
Did I just offend people?
Well, are we just? It's like at some point the tropes are being turned over on their head for the sake of doing so, and they lose a lot of meaning because
one time at band camp, I beat the shit out of somebody with my tuba.
Oh gosh,
that's a different movie.
So he there's one point in the narrative. Corey's knocked over the side of a bridge, and there is something that pulls him into a sewer system. You see him get taken off. And no, it is not the clown from It, but rather it is a very not able-bodied, aged, weakened Michael Myers, who apparently feeds off of harming people, but has grown hungry in his murderous years. Yeah.
He's been on a slight diet.
And there's something that happens in Corey. Something clicks. It's almost like a digital or an emotional imprinting from Michael Myers onto him.
Well, there seems to be, in that particular scene, there seems to be some type of two-way transmission, right? Michael stares into the windows of Corey's soul and sees his pain and goes, "Oh, I could use this," or because at some point, he's got his hands around Corey's neck, and he could probably kill him even though he's in his weakened state, but they do lock eyes. And again, this isn't the first time in the Halloween franchise that this type of psychic transference has happened. This took place, with Daniel Harris's character in Halloween 4 and 5. So, but the execution here is maybe a little lost in translation, lost in the editing. I don't particularly have a problem with it. But yes, there does seem to be some type of transference going on as they see into each other's eyes. Longingly, I guess. Corey wants to live, and Michael's like, "I want to kill you because I'm hungry, but I guess I'll let you live." So.
And then later, seeking the power, Corey goes back, steals the mask, overcomes Michael Myers, steals the mask, and then he starts acting like Michael Myers. And then you're watching the film, and you're going, "Wait, hold on a second. Is he Michael Myers now?" Right. Then there's some weird point in the film. I'm just going to go through this because I actually have such distaste for it. There's this point where he's doing the deed of harming somebody, and then Michael Myers joins him. And it's like, okay, I guess we got some sort of weird mentorship happening.
Yeah, it's an apprenticeship of some kind. My guidance counselor didn't tell me about that track in high school, but hey, it's fine. Okay, it works for some people.
That's probably because you have a dark heart. It's black, meaning it has a lack of color.
It's a lack of color. It's a lack of goodness. Okay, it's a lack of humanity.
Like, oh my gosh, what a metaphor. Anywho,
it works. Okay, I could show you the video. It's better than this. It's better than this. It's
the whole time.
Look, carry on because
the whole time. Laurie Strode is worried about her granddaughter, and you would be too. And she's better than him, but whatever. She can't see it. He's a bad boy,
Well, initially, Laurie wants to give him the benefit of the doubt. Initially, she's like, I know what it's like to have a whole town talk about you behind your back, So there was some, she did have some compassion on this kid, but the more she watched him, and she did, the more she realized that he was struggling with something that didn't lead to anything good. And so that's when she decided, he's not, this is a bad idea.
I feel like it is a very shallow metaphor for addiction and drug abuse. Seeing that happen, but nevertheless, she has warned him a number of times over. She's cautioned him. She's offered notes of help, and he's just keeps going down the alleyway, the boulevard of broken dreams. And now there's a moment where he sees her as a threat, and he's going to try to kill Laurie Strode, but she's waiting. She's no hapless victim.
No.
And when this happens, there's also the reemergence of the real Michael Myers, her real enemy, her real foe. And quite ceremoniously, she bests him, and he seems to die almost in a crucifix shape, I might say.
You might say table. That. On the table with a lot of blood.
Drained of blood. It's kind of the inversion of some Eucharistic weird thing.
Something I read somewhere.
Townspeople show up. It's more mimetic desire, and they decide to take the broken, bloodied body of Michael Myers and parade him around town.
It should have ended in a burning.
Should have ended in a burning. There would have been
like a Viking funeral. Yeah, I mean,
and there would have been some symmetry there, but they have him mangled in a mangled machine
in a Rob Zombie-esque type way. Come on,
Rob Zombie-esque type way. Yeah. And so ultimately that's the conclusion. And
that's not quite the conclusion.
All right, you go. You've straightened me out here because I'm trying to forget this movie.
Look, no. Well, you're gonna, if you're trying to do that, you're gonna miss the best part, because the conclusion, the way this film ends, I actually feel like post death. I mean, I like the processional. I just didn't like how they offed the body. I thought that was very unreal, ritualistic, and they could have had could have been better. But what Laurie says in voiceover in her memoir.
Oh yes, you're correct. Yeah. Sorry.
And this is the beautiful symmetry that I wish there has to be some more footage in the editing room. How movies get made. It's amazing that anything gets made that's worth talking about. But in this particular film, she finishes her memoir, and then she says, "Evil doesn't die; it just changes shape." And as that happens, her monster in the form of Michael Myers is dead. There's no coming back from what he went through. And then as it ends, it shows different rooms in her house, well lit, rays of light coming in. There's no breathing underneath, on the track like there was in the original 1978, where it showed all the rooms and Michael breathing through his mask.
Yes, and in darkness, right?
Yeah, and it ends in darkness. And this movie does the exact opposite, and I think it's very powerful. That she is finally done with her monster, and that evil that she had in her life has finally been released, and it shows that in a very visual way. And I did think that was a very powerful way to end this film and her story. We can discuss about how I felt about everything in between, and coming up to our our segment Hannibal's Bites, where we criticize things. I've got some criticisms, but that is not one of them.
Let me just say you're absolutely right, and I completely. It's been a minute. We friends, for those of you listening to us and giving us the grace of your ear for a little while. We actually saw this film together a couple months ago when it first came out, and then we recorded a review, and we lost recording, and then battled laryngitis for basically 2 months. So. Yeah. It's been a spell, but you are right. That was a very powerful, and the that as she finishes her memoir is a powerful end to the story of Laurie Strode, and it's a powerful use of the word shape once again. Mm-hmm. Evil just changes shape. Let's go now. I think we've been talking about what we enjoy about these films. The turning over of old tropes, I think getting back to some of the original brilliance. And now, because we have been criticizing throughout, I'm going to bring my heaviest criticism on the just the logical consistency or incoherence of evil. Let's turn to a segment we call Hannibal's Bites, where we ask the question, where did the film fail? Or in this case, we're asking about the entire trilogy.
Hello. Is this Clarice? Oh, hello, Clarice.
And for me, in Hannibal's Bites, it is the question of evil. We've been playing with it. Certainly, it's played with during all the incarnations of the franchise. Is evil something from within, or is it something from without? Going back to Carpenter's interest in that dichotomy of how you can do evil in a narrative. I think it fails. I think it fails in trying to even scare you. I think the third one, Halloween Ends, isn't even that scary, because I think what it does is, I think ultimately these three movies land on the idea that evil is a thing. Evil is a force. Evil is a power. Evil is a something out there in the world that goes bump in the night, that lurks through parts of all this created world that we live in. It can be within and can be without, but evil has its own ontology, its own ontic status, right? Its own being, its own identity. Well, I think it lacks the ability to really make that sing, because what you're doing is you're dealing with the universal. You're trying to deal with the universal big of evil, and you're trying to distill it down into this one character called Michael Myers, to which they really can't. It's not enough of a vehicle to handle that concept. It was always more as terrifying when the inductive approach was used, by looking at an individual, the very particular thing called Michael Myers, or the shape, with the blank stare, lurking with the mystery, to then let the mind open up to the question of this concept of evil.
Yeah.
So I think that's a criticism of the film. And then before we go any further, let me just say that I think ultimately one has to kind of contend with what evil is.
Yeah.
And in the great tradition of the West, you do have those two options. You have evil as a thing, or, to follow Augustine of Hippo, evil is privatio boni, privation of the good. Certainly, that becomes a large part of the Christian tradition, and later on, certain traditions kind of come up with the concept of evil as a thing. Like, think about the Force, the dark side of the Force, or the nothing in Never-Ending Story. They call it a nothing, but it's definitely a thing floating through.
It's a wolf, right? It's a wolf.
It's a presence. It's the devil. It's the demons. It's whatever. But evil as nothing, no thing, means that evil doesn't have a substance. Evil, the question would be, from like a theological point of view, is, if God created all things and created them good, then where does evil come from? Well, evil can only then be good, which has been misordered, misused, twisted, like a cavity or a cancer, a cell that has been turned or manipulated, a cavity, an absence, an abscess. Or we could simply say a rock is a good thing, but used incorrectly, not to build, but to hit, it becomes used for evil. So there's no evil thing, there's only evil action.
Yeah.
I think that is part of the tension throughout the whole movie. All the movies is they're dealing with evil as nothing and evil as everything, almost. All right. My bad for going on and on, Ryan. What are your Hannibal's bites?
Well, my Hannibal's bites is, at least for the last film, I did not like the character regressions of Allison. I did not like the...
Here.
Yeah, I did not like the loose end that they left from Halloween Kills. They set up so many things in that movie that they did not pay off in the third film. I mean, they just left them and went a completely different direction. So, yeah, I did not like that. For Allison to have gone through the first two films and then end up that Allison in Halloween Ends, there's something that happened in those 4 years that it just doesn't make sense. Her character in Halloween Ends was very flat. I did not like the relationship that her and Laurie had. Again, just judging based off of where they left things from the first two films, something happened. Something had to have happened that they don't show us in Halloween Ends that explains the tension in their relationship. So that's one Hannibal's bites for you that I did not care for. Secondly, I didn't care for the extended look at Corey and how he becomes like the Shape 2.0. they're essentially trying to do this in-depth psychological analysis at how somebody could become Michael Myers, and it's just a rehash of what Rob Zombie did in his version that I think is better. Like, at least, and he even Corey even has the overbearing protective mother that that tries to be the girlfriend. It's kind of a broken home situation. It wasn't as grotesque or circusy as Rob Zombie, but I feel like at least when Rob Zombie tried to take on that question of how does a psychopath become a psychopath in a way that embodies those versions of evil that you're talking about, he just did it in I think a superior way than David Gordon Green, even though the aesthetics are different. But I ultimately find that the psychology behind it almost identical. I think I like Zombie's execution better. And so for my Hannibal's Bites for the Halloween Ends, it just wasn't compelling enough because it took so long for them to say what they were trying to say. They could have said it much, much faster. And then you don't have Corey being Michael Myers killing people, because half of the people that died in Halloween Ends, Corey kills dressed up as Michael. It's like he's like, hey, I got to put on a Michael Myers costume and be him for a night. Yeah, so that's probably the most scathing, the most scathing of Bites, is that ultimately he just did what Rob Zombie did, just did it in a different aesthetic style, and I don't think it works.
Yeah. So my overall assessment of the trilogy is it's kind of like my high school career. Start off strong, working good, but then you get senioritis and you kind of coast. Now, I think maybe they just try to cram it into 3 because I think the pacing is right. Your criticism of the pacing is right. We hop to things. You're like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I think it was too audacious metaphysically as well as narratively and character in terms of character development on that last one. All in all, I still say watch the first Halloween first, and I really do. The second one to me is okay. H2O is passable, but but the first 2 of David Gordon Green's installment to me are really, really worth the time. And I think that you're going to hear this time and again because I'm just interested in why monsters scare us. Monster theory is a fascinating field. There is at least I go look up the name of the vampire scholar who does folkloric vampire and literary vampires.
Nice.
Who just her quote sounds like something that we used to talk about in seminary with the general monster. Her quote is simply that each age creates the vampire it needs. Yeah. And you and I used to always say when you were working on Ryan, everybody did a master's thesis on the theology of horror films.
She stole my line.
We say that every
generation creates the horror film that they need to deal with their fears, their societal fears.
Processing the world. And so I think that it's interesting that, when you're dealing with the original Halloween, or you move into the ripoff Friday the 13th, or you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, you're dealing with Reagan era concerns. That's why the final girl always seems to be kind of moral majority pure, I think.
Moral majority pure.
The bad guy is pretty obvious. Look over there.
Yeah.
We knew who the bad guy was. It was Russia. We were at the end of the Cold War.
Right.
It was pretty hard and fast goodies and baddies over here. By the time you got to the films like Saw, there was a lot more like weird, like is the bad guy helping you? Are you hurting yourself? And so, we're dealing in an era of time when our villains, nationally speaking, are terrorists that may look just like us and have been radicalized. You don't know who's coming after you.
Right.
And now we're back to a retread of an older movie, but at the same time, I think this really fits today when we live in a world where we are a monster sometimes. When you have people not caring about each other during a pandemic, when you have another black man dead in the street, when you have people treating each other with great suspicion, when conspiracy theory is the most compelling thing going, and it so happily otherizes people
Yeah.
to be the
Yeah.
villainous. Taking a Michael Myers, you all right?
Yep.
You got a hacker over here. We taking a Michael Myers and twisting it some is really an interesting way for us to deal with the questions we face, and the question ultimately still is, what's evil?
Yeah.
And what's good?
Yeah.
Are we good? Are we evil? Or is evil
Yeah.
something that happens to us, or do we participate in it?
Well, and I
How
think,
about that mob mentality?
how about that mob mentality? And that's something that both, that's something that you'll encounter throughout the entire run of any Halloween film that you pick, right? You're going to encounter, I think, both versions of evil at some point. And I don't know if, 100, when you sit down to write a screenplay, your target's about 110 pages or so, right? I don't know if 110 pages is enough space to kind of to deal with both versions or expressions of evil, right? And I think that's probably why Halloween Ends wasn't so scary beyond maybe the jump scares, right? Because it's
dealing with too big, like
it's
I said,
dealing with
metaphysically the universal in a particular, and it doesn't work.
And you put Michael Myers in a sewer. And he's like 85 years old. Like,
you had to wait a very long time to get to Michael Myers.
It's almost an hour in.
All right, we get
I digress.
Yeah. We're having a full buffet of Hannibal's bites.
Yes, I'm full now.
Let's ask the question like Buffy. Where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here?
Yeah. And I know you and I can't promise anything, but we hope to be looking at other horror franchises. We hope to look at. I want to look at those new films all put together by Jordan
Peele.
Jordan Peele, from Get Out to Us to Nope. There's a lot of interesting horror that's coming out. And not sure where we'll go, but we're going to keep asking questions about the horrific, the monstrous. What does it mean for our need for peace in the world? What does it mean for our desire for the divine, the holy, or lack thereof? And what does it mean for human psychology? All these big questions. My good friend Ryan, do you have anything to share before we cut out of here?
No, I think this has been a good exploration of the Halloween franchise and a good overview. I look forward to seeing, horror films for me. It's like an extended meditation on our mortality, right? They're all about death and dying badly. And it's tough to watch that and not think about it. And so, I mean, I don't want to die, with an axe to the head. That looks very painful. But yeah, so I look forward to having, that's where we go from here, to continue this conversation on, the manifestations of our fears, that we see in the horror films that get released, and have this conversation about, really, what it means to be human. Yeah.
All right. Well, my friends, it's been a good one. We hope to see you next time. Please do like us and share us and subscribe. Have a great one.